Melanthia, my gorgeous pet. I send this message to you at some expense, as I've been told by more than one Cainite that you're dead. As you can imagine from me writing this, I think it's possible that that is not the case, and that you are indeed alive, though probably not well. I've engaged the services of the remarkable Tremere detective Miss Egan to find you and put this letter into your hands. She's no particular friend of mine, so be mindful not to shoot the messenger, as I imagine by now you've realized what comes next. I am going to expose everything I know about you, which is a great deal, to everyone I know that knows you. I can almost feel a warmth in my chest as I envision it, the way your pretty eyes must be widening at this very moment. My dead heart throbs once more to beat just thinking of it. Imagine every sexual indiscretion, every lie, every betrayal, every life you've broken, and every death you've plotted and secured, publicized. And let's not forget the desperate and pathetic expressions of longing you've made for the woman who abandoned you before she forgot you. The many, many sins you've committed to secure her again. I do intend to start my tell-all with Amelia before I spread it to every Camarilla court of consequence, unless you do precisely what I say. You are a wonderfully efficient liar, Melanthia, and the most cunning of spies. But I run stables, not partnerships. You're going to become one of my girls, and you can start by attending me in the New World. Recent events have, unfortunately, called me away from London, so I've made my way to the United States, Chicago to be exact, where I'll be putting you to work in ways that will eventually delight you. Now I know what you're thinking. You're letting that Lasombra pride bubble up in that head of yours. To heed it would be a mistake. I understand you want to say no. I understand all my prime racers. But here's why you won't. You see, I informed the Sabbat of our little relationship, so that's one bridge already burnt. They're unforgiving as a rule, but you, my dear, tangled with some of the worst. After I set fire to your reputation amongst the Camarilla, there'll be nothing left for you. You'll be a pariah. You'll exist forever with the knowledge that Amelia will never love you, never want to see you. And when I tell Peter, well, he trusted you, Melanthia. You recall the information you gave me, which blossomed into the Tremere's attack on Eric? I know Peter gave you that, which means that you, in your jealous efforts to remove Eric from Amelia's life, betrayed the one person in all the world who truly loves you. I will break you, my dear, like a wild mare, if you force my hand, and put you into my stables tamed that way. Or we can do this the easy way, where you come willingly to join me in America, and you keep your reputation, your dreams of Amelia, and your Malkavian suitor, all intact. Though I'm afraid your little dance with the Sabbat is quite done. Something to consider while you mull over your decision. While Amelia and Eric will likely keep their rage confined to slandering your name, I would be very worried about your Malkavian. You may be his greatest desire, Melanthia, but he is a volatile individual. Most of his clan are. Because of their oddity, many Cainites foolishly dismiss Malkavians when considering the list of dangers they might face in their nightly lives. But in truth, these lunatics are some of the most dangerous kindred in existence. What they lack in physical strength, they make up for in obsession. Rather than claws, they have the ability to dement the minds of their enemies. Instead of great speed, they have a mastery over invisibility and patience, allowing them to learn everything about you. They have very little in the way of moral limitations in light of their madness. The beast already tears at our souls. Imagine that stacked with derangements. Malkavians can find your haven, watch you as you go about your business, and drive you mad, all while engineering the circumstances which will destroy you. That's before opening an entire bag of tricks each Malkavian has developed to thrive in eternity, some of which are very deadly, and on the rare occasions, defy reality itself. It sounds like fiction, which is the best kind of truth. And with that in mind, I have the most delicious tale to share with you, one that involves the most curious kindred, the Malkavian Prince of Hamburg, Midian. He was known as the Mad Duke, and his story was one of such curious horror that it stuck with me for decades, like the clap. Midian was very invested in the ecclesiastic power of the church, obsessed with it, really. He had spent more than a century developing influence over the bishops surrounding Hamburg, seeking to build a domain of heaven, manifested in medieval Germany of all places. But the Mad Duke was a very unlucky leech, the poor thing. You see, while everyone buzzes about the Camarilla or the Sabbat, these weren't the first sects. Cainites had been working at this little bailiwick for quite a while. Blood cults like those of Mithras, vampire kingdoms like the Courts of Love. People talk about these sometimes, but there were also ideological alignments like those we see today. And one such group were the Prometheans. These kindred dreamed of recreating Carthage in the harmony of kindred and kind associated with it, and poor Prince Midian's plans were in the way. This small, early sect was no ivory tower, but they had more than enough combined power to sweep away the mortal focus on larger matters. After the Prometheans overthrew Midian's control over the local church, his mind began to shatter. He no longer found himself able to trust visiting kindred, or even those who lived within the boundaries of his domain. It occurred to him that there was only one way he could truly trust others, and that was by keeping them as close as possible. He diablerized visitors to Hamburg, imagining their souls as part of his vampiric court, before consuming those in his own domain. He would sit alone for hours in his grand dining hall, speaking to phantom kindred and having long and elaborate conversations with them. Primogen meetings became a farce, as he spoke to people who now only existed in his mind, or rather in his veins. In an empty prince's hall, he debated himself over the issues of the day, going back and forth over Toreador interest or Ventry grievances. A vampire gathering of one, a graveyard for anyone else. The neighboring domains would usually have sent coteries to destroy such a crazed prince, but Midian was blessed by a certain elder in his city. Penelope, a Cappadocian on the path of death and the soul, was fascinated by Midian's madness and saw him as a perfect subject for her research. She used all her power and influence to keep his crimes hidden, thus ensuring his survival. Melanthia, you would have loved to hear him ramble on about his twisted thoughts and desires. He might have reminded you of your friend. He might remind you more of him still once I've told Peter the degree to which you've used and abused him. After all, what the Prometheans did to Midian was just business, and look where his wild rage took him. You might say, aren't all princes a little crazy? Of course they are. But the question ultimately is the nature of the kind of trouble a Cainite can create. And Malkavians generate a special kind of trouble. Speaking of trouble, have you heard of the Malkavian artist known as Bosch? I believe he claims to be the real Hieronymus Bosch, although he's far too young to be the genuine article. He would get very upset when anyone doubted his identity, stating the paintings done by the mortal identified under that name as plagiarism and degenerate. His art is not for the faint of heart, my dear. He creates visualizations of a person's inner fears through the use of dementation and auspex. Can you picture that, pet? The thing that haunts your nightmares extracted from your pretty little head and put onto a canvas. But it's not just the techniques that are shocking. Oh no. He uses the bodily excretions of his subjects to paint his works. Blood, brain mass, and God knows what else. It's ghastly. Bosch arrived in Vienna in 1463, and for several years he continued his gruesome art before the Toreador and Tremere stepped in to protect the masquerade. An Alistair by the name of Nathan Mendelssohn raised inquiries, and the Tremere decided to sweep the whole nasty business under the rug before it attracted too much attention from the Camarilla. Using some arcane magic, the warlocks found some way to trap Bosch within one of his own paintings. It was a fitting end to a monster who dared to jeopardize the masquerade, and do so with the most disgusting art materials. But here's the interesting part, my dear Melanthia. Bosch is still conscious, and he's reaching out to other Malkavians, trying to find a way to free himself. It's a dangerous game he's playing, and if he's successful, the consequences will be dire. The Tremere will not take kindly to anyone who tries to release him back into the world, and once the old man finds his knives and paintbrushes, the masquerade will again be in peril. So, my dove, no politics or ideology at stake here. Nothing of power or prestige or even love. Just madness, manifesting in pain and suffering for others. And then there's the practical Malkavian, not bitter from defeat or engaged in the trivial pursuit of painting guts on canvas. Let's talk about the successful Malkavian with purpose, whose madness manifests as being indifferent to the cost his dreams may require. Let's talk about Harold Zettler. This deranged Malkavian was part of a rare bloodline that practiced dark thaumaturgy in an attempt to aid those wicked Salubri against the Tremere. This Malkavian group had learned these dark arts from an unnatural demonic entity, and I suppose their thinking was that the ends would justify the means. Little did they know that Harry was a sneaky one, because Zettler sold them all out to whatever demon they dealt with, and tricked them into being sacrificed for the expansion of his own power. For a time he would disappear from Cainite society, but he left behind several tomes which he wrote in his own hand. His writings tempted several German vampires into infernalism, as they sought the easy path to great power, until the books were discovered and destroyed by Joseon archons working for the Camarilla in the 19th century. He would re-emerge some few centuries later, quiet, confident, and utterly depraved. He has been known to indulge in acts so heinous that the word sadistic does not even come close to doing them justice. Some say he was a Hessian mercenary in the American Revolution, murdering colonists for the sport, and leaving bizarre structures behind made from their spines. Other stories speak of a cult he created in the Black Forest, whose members committed suicide when he bored of manipulating their minds and hearts for his amusement. He is believed to have become a serial killer in St. Petersburg, where he engaged in cannibalism, presumably for the novelty. Recently, he's even believed to have participated in the Nazi camps. But the truth is, no one really knows the extent of the horrors he's capable of. And yet, despite his monstrous reputation, Zettler is an extremely affluent Sabbat Cainite. He serves as the director of the Special Projects Division within the secretive international corporation known as Pentex. He's even been offered a role of Priscus by some prominent members of the Sabbat who see him as a spiritual leader. But they don't realize the rotten entity Zettler serves. The devil himself. All these Cainites are known to us, and we have met those who have met them. But what about those unspeakable shadows that lurk in the lost history of the Malkavian clan? The nightmares the Malkavians fear. The ones we think of as myth. The lunatics claim they can sometimes hear or feel these beings, particularly when they get too close to certain old places of power. I know of two dark and terrible creatures. The Malkavian I extracted these stories from did so while weeping blood. I know torture is not the most reliable means of gathering honest information, but this is one of those instances where I trust what was told to me. The girl was simply too frightened, and it wasn't me she feared. She confessed her certainty about these beings came from something called the Madness Network, which is a telepathic union the Malkavians share, and these dark ancient beings can sometimes be heard there. The first of these entities is known simply as Anku. It is an ancient creature, a monster that haunts the dreams of Malkavians. Some say it was born in the days when agriculture was a budding art, and others claim it was even embraced as a sacrifice to an earth goddess. But its duty to the earth did not end with death. Anku is said to be the first of the serial killers, or perhaps even the patron saint. Some whisper that it was a Methuselah, the grandchild of Malkav himself, a faithful servant of its sire. Its power is so great that it can walk unscathed through Moonbeast territory, or even vanish from one place and appear miles away, where vampires, especially Malkavians, are known to disappear from their hunting grounds without a trace. Members of the clan who know of Anku treat its legends with reverence and loathing. The creature is so fearsome that even the Madness Network itself vibrates with whispers, repeating its name after a Malkavian disappears. The other is a thing known as the Word Eater, and it is so fantastical, and my mad little captive was so disinclined to speak of it I had to break her more than once to get any tell of it. What she told me is tantalizing enough, but perhaps Peter can tell you more, if you don't ruin your relationship first. The Word Eater, the Malkavian legend among legends. They say he was once a sage of great wisdom, but all that was ruined by old Malkav himself, and naturally he was driven insane following his embrace. In his mad enlightenment, he discovered that he could sustain himself not only on blood, but on anything he consumed. He devoured rocks, colors, even ideas. But it was words that he craved the most, because he believed they would make him wise again and restore his sanity. But he couldn't be satisfied with any old words, mind you. He needed the essence of a thing, a true name. And in consuming these true names, he subsumed the very existence of a thing into himself. When he learned this great secret of eating names, of biting off bits of reality and gulping them down, the first name that he ate was his own. He is forced to feast on others' existences in a form of vampirism that is more severe than the curse levied on Cain by God. Some Malkavians say that the words he eats are gone forever, and so are the ideas. No one will ever know what ideas are missing, because they are gone, and gone retroactively as well, so that the Word Eater makes reality smaller with every bite. Still, there are Malkavians who defend this creature, saying that the Word Eater uses his talents to protect them from their kindred enemies and helping free all living beings. Is any of it true? Who knows? My Malkavian was convinced of it. I do wonder what that says of them, to believe in such ancient stories and such dark monsters. Perhaps they know something we don't. Or maybe it's only that their baseline for meaning is more colorful. I do know that when Peter finds out you've betrayed him, he's going to cut you from chin to shins, though I don't know what will hurt you worse, his violence or his grief. If you're wondering why I'm doing this, Melanthia, you're less intelligent than I gave you credit for, and that would be disappointing indeed. You're far too pretty to be a complete waste, but don't ever make me regret the effort it took to hobble you. Be a good girl now, and pack your things. Madam Filth, Clan Nosferatu, Chicago, September 1944.